I'm sharing joy. Like that's the gut feeling of what I experience when I teach is joy, because I get to see someone along this journey. I love that part about teaching. And I'm like, okay, so joy is what I have to get in touch with. Joy is the thing that brings me excitement about this role of teaching. Now, second level, where else do I feel that feeling of joy?
Welcome, everybody. I'm really excited today to have a guest on the show that I think is going to really change how you see things, how you understand work, how you understand yourself. And I'm not going to give too much of her background because she's got a really cool story that she's going to share. I'll simply say that she is very multidimensional. I think it's going to reach you wherever you're at in your career. So, Jen, thank you so much for joining me.
My pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.
Awesome. So Jen's going to talk with us today about separating your worth or your self-worth from your work. And what I want to do is ask you, Jen, just start with your story, because again, when you and I talked on the pre-interview, that's really what engaged me at a much deeper level than most. And so some people might say, wait, oh, another person's story. This is a ridiculously cool story. And I think you're going to hear a lot in it that resonates with you. So share a little bit about your journey and then what led you to the work you're doing and how that also then led to you getting more in touch with your worth and separating that from your work.
It's been a definitely a varied career to lead me to where I am. It's one of those, part of the reason I have my star background is it's this chaos of, in the moment it doesn't look connected, but when I look back, there is definitely a pattern to it. And making sense of those patterns is kind of what led me to where I am. Um, I have a degree in insurance. I used to work in corporate America, but I followed my heart when an opportunity came up to become a professional ballroom and Latin dance instructor. And it's a huge leap of faith to be able to do something like that, to be able to do not what everybody expects of you to do. You know, that's not the expected journey, especially not when you already have a business degree. But I took this huge leap of faith and really wrapped myself. I've always loved being a dancer, loved everything about dance, so I had a great opportunity. And it became my everything. So much so that my personal life and my social life and my work life were all one thing. And I loved what I was doing. And I felt like, I'm so lucky that in my late 20s, I've already figured it out. I'm living my purpose. I'm doing the thing. I've got it all figured out. I took this leap of faith, and just like the movies say, now the rest is supposed to be golden. And then I had an injury, actually during a dance competition, where I injured my spine. And the long and short of it is I've been left with a partial permanent disability because of that injury. But it took me out of work for 5 years and 4 surgeries. And one of the worst moments, my depression moments of my life, that I wouldn't say just a moment. I mean, it was 4, 5 long years of it, where I think it's the first time I really thought about this concept where my worth and my work were connected as one. Because when my doctors told me you're going to have to find a new hobby, I was speechless. And then also very angry because how dare you? Like, that's not my hobby. This is my life. Like, do you understand everything that I've given up to pursue my dream? So, and I remember saying to my doctor that I don't know who I am outside of dancing. So if I can't dance, if I am not this thing that I've spent my whole life and my whole dream, then what am I? And because I thought that was my purpose and that's everything I was supposed to do, I really felt lost, because everything I had tied up, everything I was, my whole identity as a human and a value in this earth was tied up being a dancer, being a teacher, being all of these things. And it set me, like I said, into one of the worst depressions of my life. And fortunately, I have a wonderful group of friends and family who love me back to health. And I thought, you know what, I'm not going to dance again. I'm not going to go down that road again when I'm healthy enough to be on my own again. I moved out to Southern California and I was like, that's it. No more snow on the East Coast. I'm not going to slip and fall on the ice. Not going to hurt my back. No more dancing. Oh, wait, I'll just take a part-time job dancing. Which then led to me creating this charity, this nonprofit, where I was teaching dance as an adaptive therapy to wounded warriors. It was a program called Soldiers Who Salsa, and started with a 6-week class, ended up being 24 locations throughout the US, sponsoring salsa night in Afghanistan. I've got my most prized possession, a flag that was flown in my honor over Afghanistan because of the work we were doing. It was, again, like, it was one of those stars aligning kind of moments where I'm like, oh, if everything I just went through with my own pain, my own physical pain, my own emotional pain led me to create this program, then I guess it was all, not necessarily that it's all worth it, but now it all makes sense. Now it all makes, oh, you wouldn't have had the emotional capacity, the bandwidth to really understand what someone is going through when they're in constant physical pain, when they've lost their career, when they've lost all these things, that I was like, oh, my life prepared me for this moment. And then I thought, aha, I found it. This is my purpose. Now I got it. Here I go. Feet first, right on in. And I worked 7 days a week. If you'd given me an 8th, I would have worked that too. And I didn't notice it happening again because I felt so driven by what I was doing that I had no boundaries. I had no separate personal life from my work life. I worked other jobs, so I was always working, and I didn't make time for myself, and I didn't think about it because I was loving what I was doing. But eventually, the stress of running an organization became, very real. Nonprofits, very challenging, especially if you're starting it from scratch. So constantly keeping funds in, constantly keeping something going, the stress of all of that really started to weigh on me, and my health started to decline. I have Lyme disease, so stress is a very, I really have to pay attention to stress because it can really weaken my immune system even more than it already is. And the stress, I had pneumonia 6 times in a year. And my doctor was like, pay attention. What's it gonna take for you to listen? Like, you're going too hard. You have to back down. And I was like, nope, I can't. This is my mission. And I even said to my board of directors at one meeting, like, I will fight for this organization till my last dying breath. That's how passionate I felt. But I mean, those words, my last dying breath, when my doctors are like, well, we're close. You're 6 times in a year. What are you doing? And I had to take a leave of absence for health reasons. And then after that, I realized, like, ooh, this is worse than I thought. And I resigned. And if I thought my depression was worse when I hurt my back, where I was then, as I resigned, this is 2017, was worse than that other moment. I mean, by far, because I had risked more, right? I'd gone to this, international level of running this whole thing and getting invited to a White House summit to talk about our work that we had done. And now, so the crash was that much farther down, and it was that much harder. And I found myself again at this same moment of, if I'm not an executive director, if I'm not the founder of this organization, if all of that is gone, who are you? And I had no answer to that question. And I thought, God, how did I end up here again? And worse than the last time. So it led me on this really tough and internal journey to try to figure out not only the pattern, like, how did we end up here again? Why did you end up here again? And how can we make sure we don't do this again? And that's really led to the work that I do now, leading workshops on really all the thousands of dollars I've spent in therapy and self-work that I've done to have some programs for other people who might struggle with that same thing. I find a lot of friends who, even in a social life, going through a divorce, they say, I don't know who I am outside of my marriage. Or with coronavirus, people that have lost their jobs. If my job disappears, who am I? That where do we ever learn this whole concept of try to separate your work from who you are as a person? Because when that's not solid, it is really easy to get lost in, like, those winds of change.
Gotcha. Thank you. Wow. I'm hearing it the second time and I'm still like, wow, there's so much to that. And one of the things that I was blessed to experience when I was younger, my father has done well as an entrepreneur. and I got to watch some of his friends who did better financially by far than they thought they were going to be doing. And I got to see that money wasn't the variable. In other words, some were happy, some were not. And for the most part, you've probably heard this. Some people say, it's an amplifier. If you're happy, you're going to be happier. If you're not happy, it's probably going to be more of that. And somewhere in that process, I got to watch that and internalize that. And then when I was working on my master's degree in psychology, and I first came from the business marketing / insurance world too. And as I'm working on my degree, I'm working at this runaway shelter called Covenant House and working with kids that have different things going on, and addiction, homelessness, all sorts of different stuff. And I was so blessed. I don't know where I learned this lesson, but I learned it before I went in there. Somewhere along all the reading and studying and personal growth work I did, was this idea that if you take credit for your, whether you want to call them client, patient, depending on what model you're in, if you take credit for their successes, or your children, if you're a parent, if you take credit for their successes, you're going to have to take responsibility for their failures. And that was something that I still wasn't able to fully separate from, because you get entangled in this sort of work. Even as a coach now I do, but even more so when there's so much more on the line. And I remember feeling this sense of, well, this is for a nobler cause than just me. So this has to be my work. How can it not be my work? And so I've got to be happy doing this. And then even pressure on that if I'm not happy. I've got to be satisfied doing this. I've got to make decent money. Well, that feel I was about to take a pay cut in half to do that. And all these different things. And then I was able to witness people around me, because I at least had that idea in my head. And I watched some people that did take it to be a little too much. And again, they were just more, somebody would say hard on their sleeve, but it was more that their heart was in everything. And yet when something comes back and it didn't work out, they'd be devastated. And I remember once one of the youths I was working with was having some challenges, and he was doing some not so good things to himself. And those stopped for a while I was working with him. And then eventually it stopped for like maybe 3-6 weeks, whatever it was, which to a lot of people, yay, that's happening. And I'm thinking, okay, it's not, this isn't going to persist. I'm not that good. I know what's going on. And then he started back doing these things that were somewhat harmful to himself. Nothing deadly, but none of that stuff is ever really a good thing. And the feedback I got from someone was, well, what did you do? I said, whoa, you're overestimating what I can do. I don't have that kind of power. But again, that's something, with all the reading, with a mother who's an intuitive and reads spirituality and psychology, and had me, I mean, with that, all that, and a degree and a coaching certification, I was barely able to see that. So I can only imagine what somebody who's not been exposed to that, because there's things I'm blind to. If you're not aware of that, or that level again of, wow, this is finally, so this is the meaning. This is why all this happened. What do you find? And the reason I guess that this is so tough is because most people think, well, if you're having some sort of existential crisis or meaning crisis, well, because you didn't do the work. And I find, no, it's the people often that did the most work, that worked so hard, and everybody else is looking at them, which then makes it even more like everybody's looking at you like you've got it all figured out. And you're like, what are you doing? It'd be great if I knew. What's that been like for you as the person? And then how do you help people now gain this conversation of honoring what we can do and say, yes, there's something noble about I'm good at my profession. I take it seriously, but not taking it so seriously to then where it becomes, how I see myself at such a strong level. How do you make that connection? Because again, I worked consciously to make it, and it took me years.
Yeah.
How does somebody who's not in this conversation yet, how do they start looking at that?
It's a great question. And the concept that for me worked, and where I continued, and I say work as in like, this is where I started, but this is an ongoing process for me, is understanding that there are roles that I play and there are attributes of me. And when I'm really strong in the positive attributes of me, when I am at my best, when I am really in touch with that I feel like we all know that, like that glowing feeling, or when you're in the zone, right? When you're doing, it could be as simple as having like a coffee conversation with your best friend. When you're really connected with who the core of you is, it doesn't matter what hat I'm putting on. I am better in any of my roles when I am coming from that strong core place. And I never spent any time separating those two out. So part of really my work on myself was just start listing all of the roles that I have, whether it's as a friend, whether it was as a mentor, whether a teacher, an executive director, all of these things. And then really thinking about when I was at my best in any of those roles, what are the things that came out for me? When I was the best teacher, I was creative, and I couldn't have created a nonprofit organization from nothing if I wasn't creative, but also if I wasn't caring, if I wasn't compassionate. And there was all of these words that really identified, yeah, like when I would read those, I'm like, yeah, that's who I am. I'm caring, I'm compassionate, I'm creative, I'm all of these things. And if any of those roles go away, that doesn't take away who I am. I can have a bad day. I can have a bad day as a daughter, I'll be honest, but it doesn't mean I'm not still a caring, compassionate person. I can still go back and fix that. It doesn't, there's a piece of me that belongs to just me, and that is untouchable by others, but also my responsibility to care for and guide. That if I'm ever feeling what I think of like as the opposite end of that spectrum, is when I'm feeling angry, when I'm feeling ragey, when I'm feeling the opposite ends of all those positive emotions, that I'm like, oh, you got to figure out how to get back to you. How do you get back to you? So that's a lot of the other work that I do, is constantly reminding myself that if I'm having a bad day or something's not going the way I want to, that's normal. That happens. And that it's not a reflection necessarily of my integrity, my sense of self, but it is a result of a role that I'm playing. And if I can separate the two, know how they're different, then I can bring back those pieces of myself, that caring, compassionate, kind, loving, joyful person, into whatever role I'm playing. So they kind of blend together. But if I make them just one solid mess, then when one goes away, it all goes away. So keeping those two separate, but knowing how to integrate them, has been the work that I've been doing since finding myself at that rock bottom place.
Wow, that's so huge. There's so many things that come up for me as someone who studied so much of this. And I think of what Wayne Dyer used to say, that, we're human beings, not human doings. And
Mhm.
I've studied a lot of Debbie Ford's work and integrative coaching and shadow work. And there's so much of this in here. And so there's one thing that I learned. Again, I've read so many different people listen, so I don't know. And if you're listening, you're the person, let me know. I can't remember who helped me get this idea, but was the idea of self-esteem being who you, or how you feel about literally yourself, without the beingness, without any reference to performance in any way. And then this idea of there being performance esteem. So for example, I'm pretty good at beach volleyball, so I have high performance esteem there. And if someone were to say, Wade's got high self-esteem, if we're talking about beach volleyball, you talk about brain surgery, Wade has low, very low performance esteem there. That doesn't mean my self-esteem has changed. I mean, God help me, I should have low performance esteem. I don't know how to do brain surgery. And so being able to understand that, okay, so that's not me, like you said, that's not me. That's a dimension of me. That's an aspect of me. That's Wade, the volleyball player, Wade, the brain surgeon. And so that's actually healthy. There's sort of that good sense of the distinction, and I can work on my performance esteem and be excited about it. But then, of course, the danger becomes, just like celebrating the successes of the students or the kids we have celebrated. Well, I did that. It's me,
Yeah.
me, 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 me. And then again, now slipping right back into that thing where, okay, because I performed well, that makes me good, as opposed to, wait, no, I was good and okay and acceptable in the first place. And
Yes.
by the way, either way, somebody will always think you stink, wherever you are on the spectrum.
Right.
There'll always be
Right.
somebody to tell you that you're horrible. and there'll be somebody to tell you that you're great or awesome. And I'm really simple. The people who think I'm awesome, they are such more enlightened human beings. I
That's
spend more
so
time around them.
true.
The other ones are
Absolutely.
kind of stupid. Don't, and,
Absolutely.
or at the very least, they're the wrong channel. And I'm not, jokes aside, I'm not the flavor for them. So
Right.
that's fine.
Right. Absolutely. For me, it was when I was at that low point, one of the things that helped me out, a friend of mine is a Renee Brown coach, and she had me read some Renee Brown's books. First had me watch some videos because I was like, I don't want to read. I was in such a negative space. That I, but my capacity for taking in information could last the length of a TED talk. And then I watched her TED talk on vulnerability, and I was like, oh, okay. And then I started reading her books. I'm like, oh, and there was a line in something in where she's talking about self-worth, of the difference of when we tell ourselves I'm a failure versus I may have failed at something. And I was stuck in identifying as a failure versus something didn't work. An organization that I loved, that I poured my blood, sweat, and tears into, is no longer around. And if I tied my worth to that, if that was no longer around, where I was getting stuck was that, well, I didn't know if I should be around anymore. So, and which is a really dark, awful place, to be. And when I read that line, I was like, oh, yep, that's what's happening. That's what's happening for me. I'm not, my self-worth has been tied to this job. So I am feeling like a failure. And it's not like absolve ourselves from responsibility. And there is definitely like taking personal responsibility for things that went well and things that didn't work well. Like you said, if I'm going to take credit for any of the success, I got to take credit for the failures too. But that it doesn't mean that I'm not still a good person, a caring person, joyful person. And at the moment I wasn't a joyful person, so I had to find my way back to that. But really digging into that concept was how I got myself out of that dark, dark place.
Okay. So now this is, at this point, some of the people listening to this, this podcast saying, Wade, usually we're talking about work less, make more, help people, where's the pivot? And what I've known from the get-go, and why I didn't kind of wanted to let this kind of play out in a good way, is I know from my experience that, again, when I get over identified with performance, then it ends up becoming for me, a burnout thing, because there's, at least in my experience, there's very few things as addictive as praise. And, oh, you did a good job. Oh, okay. Well, now I don't want to let anybody down. And
Right.
I'm going to keep doing that, and just literally until it stops. And that eventually can become a burnout thing. A lot of people might say, well, wait, hold on. So Jen, you started this nonprofit and then it didn't work out. And I love the way you said it stopped. It didn't fail. It stopped going. So it didn't mean it failed any more than, sometimes people die. It doesn't mean they failed. They at some point they die. A lot of people might be thinking, but hold on, if you're not doing your purpose, or if that's only one thing, which I think we're told that, and I don't particularly subscribe to that view of the world. Aren't we going backwards here? And yet you and I talked about this idea of, if you can separate your self-worth from your work, that then you can actually create more of an impact, and you can, in your community, your family, your work. What does that look like? Because to a certain degree, it almost is counterintuitive. Well, if you're not as heart into this, well, wait, we trying to be cold now? Or how is it when you can separate the two and be a little more perhaps objective, perhaps a little more calculated? How does that help you be more impactful?
That's a great question and a great point, because I think that a lot of people hear that and they're like, oh, wait, so I shouldn't be passionate about my work? And I'm like, no. What I'm saying is, don't let, if we've got two different lists here of the roles you take on, the attributes that make you, your sense of self, that the goal is to find ways to bring that sense of self into your roles. It's not that your roles like overtake your sense of self so that they're one and done. It's that if I'm stronger, if I'm really in touch with my purpose being to live as as my attributes, as myself. My purpose isn't necessarily role driven. My purpose is living this life as a joyful person, as a creative person. So spending my purpose has been shifted. I used to define it by my role, but if my purpose now is to go through this world as a creative person on a mission to spread joy and kindness everywhere I go, then that is the energy I bring into my roles, so that I am a stronger teacher now, because my purpose is these other things, is like, how to be the best possible teacher I can be. I really have to be in touch with the things that make me. And that's why I've always been successful in the past. I just didn't recognize what it was that was happening. But now that I know, I'm like, oh, shift your definition of purpose from the job that you're doing to the how you're doing whatever job it is. So I feel that you will show up stronger for your work. You will show up stronger in your community, for your family, when you are in touch with who you are and what makes you so unique and so special. There is literally no one else on the planet like you. You are you, no matter what you do. So that like core piece of you, when that is stronger, that's the person that I would bring into whatever role. And I think that what you talked about, burnout, I mean, obviously that's where I totally ended up, because I blurred those lines. I think it's a different piece of the equation, is that if I'm spending too much time, if all of my everything is kind of wrapped into this, if I don't have clear boundaries and not feeding that sense of self, that's where that burnout to me can happen.
Yeah. And, one of the things I think of as I became a father, and as I've made mistakes as a father, and just all different things of life, but specifically that role, I've learned that there are certain things that are my mission that have absolutely nothing to do with monetization or making money. Changing diapers at 2 a.m, that is part of my purpose. I'm not a diaper changer per se, and it doesn't limit my role, just that, or, puke picker upper, but it's part of that. And when I'm in touch with that, becoming a better father, because I wasn't always, I think I'm getting better, so I'll give myself that credit. You learn certain things, but that's a process too. And I think this whole thing that people seem to think is that there's these isolated roles that have no connection. And while we want to kind of be able to tap into certain ones, there is still, who we are is so connected. And so to me, when somebody is putting too much of their valuing of their self into the worth. I mean, even just to bring it down to now mechanics, and I'll even think of as an athlete. If you're an athlete and you're thinking about your shooting percentages as a basketball player, you're too
Yeah.
much in your head. You should be enjoying the game and just putting your full into the game. If you're worried too much about the numbers, we see this in large businesses where things become more impersonal and people forget the connection part. And so to me, somewhere in there's something that speaks to keeping that spark alive, that piece that is human, that still cannot be replaced by robots as much as it's been trying to be done. And that's the part, and you said it a different way, but that's who you bring to work that day.
Yeah.
And whatever you do, if you bring to work somebody that's burned out, tired, upset, down on themselves, I don't think it's too big of a stretch to think that is not a great performance indicator. And if that person's happy and comfortable with who they are, or at least comfortable with their humanness, I think that's a big piece that people miss. And so much in this, even in what I do, okay, I work 4 days a week most of the time. And then, sometimes there'll be something on a Friday that friends or entrepreneur friends are doing. There's like 30 of us getting together on a Friday. And it's like, okay. So if my entire self-worth is being a 4-day work week entrepreneur, no, I can't go. See, let me tell you about me. And it's so laden with self-important BS of, you see, I'm a 4-day work week entrepreneur and I don't have time to do these things. You all run along on your Fridays, as opposed to, oh, that's important enough for me. And I don't have to define myself completely by that, or whatever it might be. But it's difficult. I think of the movie The Devil's Advocate. Have you ever seen that movie
Yeah.
with, and I don't want to spoil it to anybody who watches this movie, but long story short, Keanu Reeves' character goes through this whole journey, and at the end, he thinks he's figured it out. And in a moment, it's like, gotcha, you're right back in the game all over again.
All over again.
And like with just a simple smile from from another character. And I won't say who, because again, but it's like just when you think like, oh, see, I've got this, and I'm all like evolved now. And again, I can think of you, I think of your journey, like even from a humble place, like, oh, I figured this out now. And I just think like, I believe there's a God, and God's smiling like, okay, well, you know, okay, but I got a little bit more going on here than
Yeah.
maybe
Yeah.
that.
And I feel like the fact that I was so happy in these different roles was a like universal, God, whatever it is that you want to call it, going, yep, you're doing the thing. If you could just realize the why you are being successful at that, then and they're like, oh, you're not paying enough attention. All right, we got like, not that I don't believe in any, meanness or malintent on any kind of universal purpose. But I do believe that when I'm not paying attention, I get signs, and the signs will get stronger and stronger and stronger until they literally knock me physically down, like they did in dancing, and like pneumonia did to me with my nonprofit career, that I had plenty of signs to slow down, plenty, but I chose to ignore them. And part of that, like, personal responsibility, accepting my role in all of this, is not like, oh, I just randomly caught pneumonia. I mean, yes, and again and again and again, to the point where I literally am sleeping for 16 hours. I have zero energy. It took the wind completely out of me. And like, if I could paid attention sooner and gone, oh, oops, and maybe made some course corrections, could things have ended up differently? Maybe. Could have been. But that's part of where I am now also, of listening to, I feel like we get messages, and the message isn't that like, oh, I saw I saw the same number pop up, or I saw this, I had a hawk land on my balcony. Like, it's not the hawk. It's that, like, that's the, like, hey, there's something you need to pay attention to. Like, there's signs. If I'm getting sick, if I'm getting stressed, if I'm getting burned out, like, these are signs from your body, like, you're headed in the wrong direction. Pay attention.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I think sometimes also, people look for it to be this dramatic thing, like there's this
Yeah.
bird that's going to fly down and it's going to have some sort of, like, I don't know, a branch, and the branches are going to drop, it's going to be broken, it's going to spell out a word or something.
Yes.
That's not been my experience. I do believe things happen for a reason. And I definitely think when I'm paying attention, things work out much better. In my experience, without getting too metaphysical, it's usually better than I had planned it to be.
Yeah.
And I think this is the thing too, of it's funny. I didn't even think this idea would come up in what we're talking about, but I think about even something as simple as basic motivation 101, the more not so cool side that comes from the corporate world. Jen, we're going to give you love and attention if you do what we want. End of story. And we're going to mask it as stars and pins and points and plaques and all these, and promotions and all these different things, which have a real world purpose. Maybe not the pins, points, and plaques, but the vacation, whatever it might be. But at the end of the day, just like a Pavlovian dog, if you don't do what we want, we're either going to, at the very least, withhold something for you, or we might zap you. And I think a lot of people forget that a lot of the business world still works that way. So when people tell me, I want to find my purpose in the business world, say, okay, it's like saying, I want to find entertainment at, or loud entertainment and movies at a library. Well, libraries for books. If you want loud entertainment, go to a movie theater. And I'm not sure that there's one particular place you go to find inspiration or meaning, but at the end of the day, for a lot of people, work is very utilitarian. It's very A plus B equals C. You do these things, you get this money. It's a trade. And I know plenty of people who trade their hours for dollars. They do their work, and outside their work, they do their life purpose, and they're happy as anything. And I know
Absolutely. Yeah.
people who do some of it in their work. I don't know anybody that does their work all the time, even whether it's the artist. If you watch any show on any famous artist, singer, this, that, you'll notice, yeah, they do that thing. What's that? Practicing. Oh, yeah, that's right. They do that practicing thing. They're not always just in front of an arena of thousands of adoring fans screaming their name,
Right.
going, "You're so awesome." They're working. And I think that's the part that perhaps people, get caught up in, this feeling, like you mentioned, some of the feelings. How would you say you separate the more healthy feelings, or how do you over time, you mentioned feeling like, okay, wait, yes, some of this is purpose, I'm aligned. And the closest way I know to tell this to somebody is if you leave, let's say, Florida, and you're at the bottom of Florida and you decide that you're driving, I say I'm driving to New York. Or in fact, I don't even say I'm driving to New York. I say, Jen, I'm going I-95. That's one of the interstates. I'm going I-95 north. You say, awesome. And we're going along and we're all happy and we're cool. And I'm figuring we're going the same direction. And you don't know where I'm going. We just know we're going 95 north. And all of a sudden I say, okay, it's time to turn left. And you're like, what? I said, yeah, we're going to go across I-10. See, I'm going to California. Like, no, wait, I'm going to New York. What? I thought we were on the same page. And sometimes we get attached, like, no, but I thought it was this. I felt this way. And this is relationships. This is so many different things, our
Yeah.
attachment to it. How have you been able to find that healthy balance of engaging and, yes, going at it 100%, 110%, and yet still being able to kind of check in, say, okay, because in my experience, when the money doesn't come and you get smacked in the face, that's easy. Oh, stuff's not working. But sometimes the money is coming in. The praise is coming in. People are telling you you're doing awesome stuff, and they're telling to you with good intentions. They see you from the outside saying, oh, you look happy. You look like you're doing what you should. How do you, now that you've done this a couple of times, done this dance, so to speak, a couple of times, how
Mhm.
do you now get a better sense of, okay, this is when I'm healthy with this, and ooh, this is where I'm starting to get too attached to this, or I am starting to blur now that self-worth and that how I do my work. How do you keep an eye on that?
That's a really great point. Because one of the things that I feel like I made the mistake of in when I was in the nonprofit was that even when I started paying attention and like I noticed them, and like I said, I noticed them and I chose to ignore them. I realized that that was a choice, that I kept it all to myself. I was, I didn't want to let anybody in on any kind of negative feeling that I had, because I was so proud of the work that we were doing, and I was constantly, you know, getting feedback from the participants in our program, um, that I was like, oh, it, one, it felt like, um, it felt so, maybe I don't know what the word is, like disingenuous to share, like, oh, how could my poor little thing that I'm dealing with pales in comparison to the fact that I'm dealing with somebody who like literally stepped on an improvised explosive device and lost their limb. Like, oh, you're upset that something's not working out with a grant, like. And so one, my negative self-talk real loud, like, how dare you get upset about this when you're dealing with this. So part of that is knowing that it makes you, it makes zero sense to compare pain. Pain is pain. So that's one of the lessons. But the other is like, because of that, because I was not in that space yet, I felt, you know, I really like shamed my own self that I could even feel anything negative, that I could feel sad or depressed or stressed out or anything, that I then kept it buried deeper and deeper and deeper. And I didn't share with anybody anything negative that was happening to me, or anything that I was feeling. So I went through it alone. And I know now, especially, like, that was a choice that I made. Looking back, maybe not my healthiest choice. If I had let other people in, if I had told my closest friends, hey, I'm really struggling, um, earlier on, that there's no reason that I had to do this alone. I chose that, and it had consequences. And by the time I started letting some of my closest friends in, there they were loud and clear of like, you have to stop. Like you're literally killing yourself for this. This, if you don't stop, you can't run this organization. You can't run this if you're sick, if you're, if you're all of these things. Like, stop or slow down. And I let them in too late. But they were also a little bit of that safety net that I knew that when I did let go, they were the ones who were going to catch me. It's that trust fall kind of situation, right? That the people that I did choose to let in, that I let them know that, like, this is something I'm thinking about, this is something I'm struggling with, and I'm going to have to resign, and I feel horrible. That they're like, it's going to be okay, I will be here to catch you. So going forward, I've asked those closest to me to be like, hey, we all know this is my pattern. And I hope now that I am better, because it's what those, now you know better, you'll do better. Maybe. But I also, as an artist, tend to get really caught up in the creative process. So it is kind of my natural tendency to like get really excited about something and go all in. That I've asked my friends, you have, blank authority to send me a text, call me out on it, be like, I think you're doing the thing again. Oh, okay, good. Thank you. Because they discovered how bad it got for me, that my friends love me, my family love me. They don't want to see me go there again. And I think there's a lot, especially in that entrepreneurial spirit of like, you got it, you're going it alone. Like, this is your mission and it's all you, it's all person driven. That, like John Maxwell, like says, you're not meant to do this alone. You got to have a team of people. And for me, part of that team of people was also, having a therapist, having someone to talk to, having, not having to go through it alone. So that's definitely the part of my friends and family can keep me in check, and they're allowed to do it.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think one of the things that definitely get caught up in is this whole entrepreneur hero journey. And I think there's a fine line between delusional hero, and between even martyr. And if you look at, I've been blessed to live in different parts of the world, and different parts of the world, at least in my experience, have a certain flavor to their mindset. So if you go with that concept of some people are in survival mode, and theoretically, or by definition, for the most part, a third world country has a lot of people in survival mode.
Sure.
If then there's that success mode where there's some sort of sense of I'm making things happen. And then there's that significance thing. And, the survival feels very much like dependence. It does not feel good. It feels like there's always something they're doing this to me. They're doing that to me. I'm so out of control. I don't want to be in that place. I feel out of control. So I want to be in the success, that independence. I did this. I do this. And if you want to call it Western civilization, because it's not just, we get used to hearing it. I live in America. You do. We get used to hearing it saying Americans, but it's just this idea of independence, which all people go through. It's the teenager that says, right, I got this. I can do all this. And that turns into the young adult that's like, yes, I'm proud. Look at me. I'm grown up. I can do all this. I'm not trying to do this out of ego. I'm not trying to thumb my nose in any faces. I'm beyond the rebel stage. I really I want to do this. And if I only see those two choices, then when things get tight, I say, well, I'm not going back to survival. I've been there. I'm not going back to dependence. Yeah. And then there's that other stage of interdependence of that we got this, we can do this. And of course it requires a little bit of that. Okay, I guess I'm not everything. It certainly requires humility. It
Sure.
requires a little bit of, okay, yes, I got here because other people have helped me. But certainly as a small business owner, when so often we try to figure out everything. And as you know, especially today, just about every one of us, if you're a solopreneur or anything like it, there's this really fearful sense of, okay, are we back in the 80s and the 90s again, where we have to pretend that everything's friggin' perfect, and anything you do wrong, like, okay, wait, is my hair like, I could obsess the whole thing. There's this little thing out of hair. Does all of this, does all this have to be that measured and that obsessive. And then it becomes hard to think, well, if I let my guard down, then I won't get the business. I'll lose the money and I'm a provider and all these different things. And then add to that, my gosh, I can only imagine as you started saying, I started unpacking, wow, that sense of guilt. Oh, me and my first world problem, while these people that you're serving, the wounded warriors, have these issues that at least visually are bigger or more daunting or more permanent or whatever word we want to put. And yet that doesn't mean that your emotions are irrelevant or who you are is irrelevant. And then again, just going back to mechanics, if you can't perform, well, it doesn't help anybody. Martyrs don't help the cause for the most
Yeah.
part. Martyrs die, and then we don't
Yeah.
get to continue the work unless it literally requires you to be a martyr. And that's a really outlandish situation for most normal businesses.
Right.
Just do the thing, be healthy. So one of the things that I really have loved that you've brought to this conversation, I'd ask you to maybe just comment on this to kind of put it together, is for the people out there that are listening to this, and if you're still listening to this at this point, my guess is something this has struck a chord with you more than just the topic. Because again, we've got a little off of the make money in mess time, do what you do best. And yet this is all indirectly. This is the protective. This is okay if you don't do this. How do you proactively, well, two things. How do you identify if maybe you're having a challenge with this? And what are some of the positive things you can do to start building that healthy separation of, yes, I'm solid, I'm an individual, and I have this business, this work that I do, and I want to do it well, but that I can still value myself without having to lose that sense of self?
That's really important work. That's really important, I think, that we do. I think that it starts with, I mean, if you are that identified with your work, piece out what, like an onion, peel back the layers. Why is that? Is it like for me as a dance teacher, I was like, I love teaching. Well, take it a step further. What is it about the teaching that you love? Oh, I love connecting with other people. Okay, what it is about the connecting that you love about other people? Like, keep digging further, and it's like, oh, I I just enjoy, like, I'm sharing joy. Like, that's the gut feeling of what I experience when I teach is joy, because I get to see someone along this journey. I love that part about teaching. And I'm like, okay, so joy is what I have to get in touch with. Joy is the thing that brings me excitement about this role of teaching. Now, second level, where else do I feel that feeling of joy? How else do I experience joy in this world? Because if I find myself depleted in joy as a teacher, I'm going to have to fill up that tank somehow. And if I'm not getting it out of teaching because I'm burned out of something that I'm doing, I have to find another resource to fill that tank back up. And how do I fill that tank back up? Where else in my life do I experience that feeling of joy? So for me, it's been like, this is why I say it's constant work, that I have to constantly remember all the places that I can find the things that make me me. It could be as simple as, I have a dog who is just a silly, goofy dog. And she plays with a rock like it's the best thing on the planet. She gets so excited, and she is so, like, there's so much joy in her face. Like, she's, how like you can sometimes see dogs smile. When she sees, I'm hesitant to even say the word because she'll probably start barking. But when she sees a rock, she gets so excited. And like, I laugh, and there's so much joy in me watching her. And for me, realizing that watching somebody else, something else experience joy gives me joy, that's what happens when I teach. Somebody experiencing joy when they're learning something new, and I get joy from seeing their joy. And like, so I know that, as simple as it might sound, I don't need to invest in anything. I don't need money to fill that tank back up. I don't need to purchase anything. I need to experience those things. So for me, it can be as simple as, again, taking my dog out to watch her play, or watching her run crazy on the beach, or connecting with a friend over coffee, laughing. I do improv. In the before times, I did a lot more improv than I'm obviously doing now, but like, finding other ways to experience that feeling, so that if in my work I'm feeling more disconnected from it, I'm feeling burnt out, I'm feeling all of these things. If I'm feeling burnt out, I have to find another source to ignite. right? If the flame is starting to go out, how do I fan that flame back into, that warm, glowing feeling again? And there has to be other ways. So part of my constant continued self-work is writing down moments every single day, like in my gratitude journal, of the things that brought me joy. I have a neighbor that gets so excited every time he sees my dog, and the smile on his face gives me joy. And I'm like, oh, there it is. So there are other ways to find it, to rekindle it, so that I can then again remind myself who I am and bring that back into my role again.
Wow, that's awesome. And so I just think of, gosh, so many of the reasons we do work or do anything, sports sometimes, there's that fine line between enjoying the game and or the applause or whatnot. And I think usually the truer thing is when you're enjoying the game or the dancing or whatever it is. And I would suggest you all, for those of y'all who are still hanging out, like, Wade, where's my work less, make more thing? Here's the thing, or enjoy life. If you can find the joy in multiple places, and I've definitely found this, but I've never been able to put it the way you just put it there. If I can get that need met in different places, I don't have to only go to one place. And I think that's the thing. I've once, and I forget where I got this idea, but of addiction being when you're trying to use something to fill a need that it can't fill. So, for example, if I'm emotionally hurt, drinking a beer might be a short term cover up, but it's not a physical substance, isn't going to cure an emotional issue. It might
Right.
temporarily distract me, but it's not going to do it. And I
Yeah.
think so often we get caught up in all these different things that work's supposed to do for us. And if we can segment it, how nice to be able to say, okay, you know what? Here's my diminishing returns. This part here, I make really good money. This part, I don't even want to do. I'm going to take that part out and I can either work less or I can build better or whatever it is. But just to be able to not look to work to fulfill everything. And I'll leave with this thought for those of y'all who have been married or in long-term relationships. There's this point where if you're not careful, you start looking to one person to meet all your needs, and it's not healthy. They're supposed to be the person that you laugh with and get romantic with and hang out with and watch the football game with. And it's like, whoa, no, you actually need your friend group and your this group. You need this balance. I think the same thing applies to work. If you're putting
Yes.
too much pressure on it, it's too unrealistic. And then asking yourself to continuously amuse yourself, entertain yourself, and be like, yay, I'm so awesome with me, that you're like, yes, that's enough. That's just such a tall order. Thank you so much.
It's my
I just
pleasure.
really love what you brought to this. Where can people connect with you and find out more about the work you do?
Really easy. It's just my name, jenables.com, JENABLES.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much. For those of y'all, I got the privilege to do the pre-interview with Jen and just learn even other things about her and what she's about. There's so much depth to what you're doing. So I encourage you all listening, take a look deeper. Um, I didn't think it was going to get this deep, and yet I think
Here we
this is
are.
awesome because that's the thing. Sometimes, and again, a lot of times people say, "Wade, your podcast is productivity, right?" I'm like, that's part of it. Like I'm doing productivity because I want to enjoy life better, and I think
Right.
this is so much of that main piece. Because if you're enjoying the life, and you don't have to have the money, you don't have to have it. I mean, you want the money, I'll take the money, but you don't
Sure.
have to have it. Then I think it can be a very different experience of life in this whole process. So thank you again for those of you all listening. As always, look forward to helping you help more people and make more money in less time. Do what you do best so you can better enjoy your family, your friends, and your life. Thanks again for listening.